Hi, David. Hi, Sam. I'm glad you could make it. I can see Polly. I can see Louisa. Lots of great people. So guys, as you're joining, as you're settling in, say hello in the chat if you can. And there should be a poll on your screen, and we'd be interested to know what you think the barriers for innovation are in your organisation. So just have a quick go at that and we'll share the results as we fly. Hi, Joe. Thanks for coming. Hi, Gemma. Just going to give people a couple of minutes. Say hello. Ellie, that's nice. Oh, yeah. One more minute, then I will get going. Becca, are you getting this? That the chat's disabled, so people can't say anything. So those of you who have just joined, welcome. There is a poll on your screen, hopefully, talking about what do you need to have a kickstart to creating a culture of innovation. So feel free to answer that poll and we will give you the results as we fly. You can use the Q&A to say hello if you want to, just as people are saying. But the chat should be working, I'm being told reliably by my tech people. So if it isn't, don't worry, I can see you. We've got a good old number of people joining, 35, counting. I can see Raf, I can see Prina. Should we see the results of the poll? Does anyone want to? Yeah, see if that works. Interesting. Okay, that's really interesting. So I am going to get going, if that's all right with people. I'm sure that people will be popping in, but we've now reached the grand total of 40 people, so that's exciting. So hi, and welcome to Rocket Fuel. This is the first in a series of our webcasts, hopefully a series, to inspire you to take action, navigate through the world of complexity and make progress towards a future-ready, thriving organisation. And I am your host today. I'm Emily, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm a partner at Andas. Briefly, and we're not going to do too much of this today because I know that you are only here for Claire, who we'll talk to you later. Andas exists to help our partners build thriving, future-ready organisations capable of innovating and adapting to uncertain times, which we are certainly in right now. We believe in the power of everyday progress, and that you, being in the organisation, are the best placed people to do that. Our aim is for you to come away from this not only with some inspiration, hopefully, and fresh perspective, but at least one, if not more, things that you can try today as a leader to shift things forward. Today's episode is all about building a culture of innovation, as you hopefully know, given you replied to the invite. And there's two parts to this show, if I can call it that. The wonderful Chris Trantham, one of our key members at Andas, is going to share our 5 bold moves, or what we call our 5 bold moves, which is a cheat sheet on how to organise to set up your organisation to be innovation ready for this world of uncertainty. And the second thing we're going to do, and the main event, is hearing from Claire Rowney, the Executive Director of Fundraising and Innovation at Macmillan Cancer Support, who used those 5 bold moves to kickstart a transformation at Macmillan in the last couple of years, supercharged by the pandemic. We'll be extracting her learnings about the journey so far. So if you have any questions or observations, please ask them in the Q&A, which some of you are already doing, which is brilliant, as we go, and we'll come to them as we fly. So let's get started. We are all acutely aware that times are changing, and you're probably all bored to tears of stories about how organisations are not set up to thrive in a world of uncertainty. But here's the thing. I believe we're in a moment of fundamental systems shift, and that's not all bad. History tells us that there's big opportunity in these shifts if you're in a position to see them and grab them. For example, most recently in living memory, in the 2008 crash, which feels remarkably similar to where we are today, after that, the sharing economy really blossomed, and that changed all of our lives. And I think that we're in a moment where we could see lots of the same happening. However, you may have seen the research our friends at McKinsey recently published, which showed that 75% of senior executives think changes driven by the pandemic will create significant new opportunities for growth. But it also revealed that 79% of them feel like they're not equipped to take advantage of it. So the question really is, what are the things that we can do as leaders of our organisations to make sure we're in a position for our organisations and the people within them to thrive? And Us is all about that opportunity. An opportunity for products and services that better meet and more sustainably meet customer needs. An opportunity for happier, more creative employees, and a collective resilience that comes when you design adaptability into an organisation. Our 5 bold moves, which we're about to hear about, are a practical guide for things you can do as a leader to make sure that shift happens. And with that, get your tea ready, and I will hand over to Chris for a 10-minute whip tour on what those 5 bold moves are. Before I hand over to Chris, I would love you to listen with a pen in hand, thinking about, okay, what am I going to take from this? And after the 5 bold moves, I'm going to give you a brief pause to think about how you could put something in action, maybe not today, but tomorrow, to take that forward for yourself. And if you have any questions, post them in the Q&A as you go. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Emily. That was great. Right. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm going to start by doing that really nerve-inducing thing and sharing my screen if I can. I should be able to see that. Okay. Let's crack on, shall we? Thanks, everyone, for being here today and for letting me share some of, I guess, what we've learned over the past 5 years, partnering with our brilliant clients, but also establishing our own business too through what's obviously been quite interesting times. I'm going to start today by making some big assumptions. So I'm going out on a bit of a limb here. I'm going to assume that all of you are a little bit frustrated and confused and exhausted with the world outside your window, and by what you experience within your workplace as you try and navigate all that change. I'm going to assume that you're looking for, or indeed you're already practicing, ways to thrive in all this uncertainty and still go about making the products, services, policies, whatever it is you do. Look, Emily's already shared with you some context around why we see the innovation skill set as so important for organizations to embrace, particularly today. So let's just get into it, shall we? I've got 5 places you can start, 5 bold moves you can make to kickstart a culture of innovation in your organization. So let's have a look at them. Number 1 is move like starlings. Why starlings? I will come to that in a minute, I promise you. But first, a common pitfall we see organizations fall into, their project teams are enormous, they're too big. And why is because as humans, we place importance on scale. We're drawn to it. Bigger means better. And because of that, the leader with the big team and the big budget gets first seat at the table. But I want you to think about the times when you've actually been involved in those big projects. It feels slow at best, and progress is hard to come by. This diagram highlights the complexity that's added every time we add just one more person, one extra line of communication to a project, that we end up spending too much time keeping people updated and not enough doing the work that will make progress. And the trouble is, to communicate, respond, and adapt through ongoing change, we need to be nimble and move fast as the context evolves around us, just like these beautiful things. This is a murmuration of starlings. It's beautiful, but it's also incredibly sophisticated. These birds are in a community that's not led by one individual issuing commands. There's no hierarchy. As it turns out, scientists discovered each bird is listening to its 5 closest neighbors for cues and information, meaning that messages ripple through the community at speed, meaning they can change direction in a heartbeat. The ability modern organizations need in an ever-changing world. So look, why should we care? How does this correlate to organizational success? A smaller team spends less time managing schedules and more time doing what needs to be done. The thing to watch out for when you've got lots of small teams is to make sure they connect together and can access the common resources inside the organization they'll need to achieve what they're setting out to do. One example where we've seen huge progress with this tactic is partnering with Novartis, as they got to grips with a new business model on the cutting edge of medical science. They had a function of more than 25 people that were collaborating across 9 countries. They weren't seeing the progress they wanted because they were spending all their time trying to update each other. We helped them to identify some key objectives and set up small teams around each. And this led not just to more impact, but a happier and, curiously, better connected function overall. So that's bold move number 1, move like starlings. Stop thinking in big programs, instead set up small autonomous teams focused around a clear objective. And for us, remove all the barriers you can to progress. Bold move number 2, build playgrounds. We know the world is changing at record speed. That means for us, we've all got less and less time to get to grips with how things work and to figure out how to respond brilliantly before everything's changed again. One way to succeed is to be more playful. That doesn't mean needlessly frivolous. It means adopting the mindset of a constant learner, both in our thinking and our approach. So who can we learn from to do this? Children are hardwired to play. They do it every day. It's fun and essential. It's the way their brains explore and begin to understand the world around them. As adults, it's our job to keep children safe while they do this, and that is why we build playgrounds. The thing that's most important in the playground is the boundary you put around it. Children understand the fun to be had is within that, and within that boundary, they've got permission to run riot. And look, the same has to be true in a business that's structured for innovation, and that's where there's a tension for us to hold. In innovation, obviously, no one has any of the answers up front. So command and control micromanaging just doesn't make any sense here. It's just going to stifle people's creativity. You have to give your teams permission to go and play, to discover novel, commercially impactful ideas, to go and explore. But that means you're going to have to accept a certain amount of waste as you and your people experiment, as you fail small and you learn fast. One way to control how much waste you're willing to risk is by getting really clear on the boundary or the scope of play. This is what we mean by building the playground. As a leader, once you set that boundary, it's not your role to dictate the play, but to stand on the sidelines, watch for danger, offer suggestions and guidance from your experience, help keep the play and therefore the learning going. When the leadership team at Novia set out to discover and define their organizational purpose, they asked us for help. They decided to let their people uncover what was truly important at the heart of their culture. It wouldn't work as a top-down exercise, although that would have been much easier for them to accomplish. They set a cross-functional team a clearly defined scope and direct them to go and explore, setting up regular touch points along the way to share work in progress. And the result was really powerful. A strategically sharp organizational purpose statement that was built for their people by their people. So that's bold move number 2, build playgrounds. The boundaries we put in place should be tight enough to give direction, but create enough freedom to encourage play. Bold move number 3, learn through experimentation. But when faced with problems, humans like to move quickly to ideas and solutions. But why is that? Well, if we think about it, problems are abstract. They raise questions and they reveal gaps in our understanding of the world, and that's really uncomfortable for us. Solutions, however, make the abstract concrete, and they provide specific answers to questions, even if those solutions are just guesses. Ultimately, solutions make us feel good. The problem in rushing towards ideas and presenting them as solutions is that they're packed with assumptions. It's just guesswork. And if left untested, they increase the risk of expensive, big reveal failures. To make sure you're heading in the right direction, you need to accept that you probably don't have all the answers. And that's really annoying. So get in the habit of running small experiments that teach you about the strengths and the weaknesses in your thinking. Then you can evolve your idea, which will ultimately de-risk it. HP were exploring direct-to-consumer opportunities, and we were partnering with them. They had a hunch that they'd found something really exciting. They had a range of ideas that they could put into production, but the truth was they had no idea if customers would buy what they were selling. Instead of building products and launching these out onto the market at great expense to find out which, if any, might be successful, we helped them create a set of dummy websites and use some clever online trickery to guide potential customers to explore different options on each. And that way we learned more about what they liked and what they didn't like. But overall, that as an experiment, it cost a few $1,000s. It gained hundreds of thousands of customer interactions and gave us conclusive evidence for which direction they should move toward next. Truly learning fast and cheap to help de-risk their thinking. That's bold move number 3, right? Learning through experimentation. The point is, we need to get comfortable with the discomfort of sharing our early imperfect ideas, get them out into the real world as quickly and as cheaply as you can to get to that early feedback that will de-risk your path to success. All right, let's look at bold move number 4, rebalancing, managing, and making. What does that really mean? Look, managing is the essential work we all have to do to keep things moving in organizations. Updating people, communicating, connecting. Making is the work that creates real value for you. Learning, experimenting, building, testing, that's where your people develop ideas and grow their understanding. The problem is, the structure of our organizations often means we spend most of our time managing information and leaving us too tired to do the high quality work of making. Here's quite a statistic for you. Time spent in meetings has more than tripled since the pandemic began. How the hell are we supposed to get anything done? Look, it's not just the opportunity cost of lost time that all of us need to be concerned about. The truth is, it takes time for us to get into that mode of thinking needed for our best ideas to come to us. You know the classic examples of this. Inspiration strikes when you're just about to go to bed, or you're going for a run or taking a bath. The point is, it takes time to get into that fuzzy subconscious mode that gets us to real creative thinking around problems. In this really simple graph, you can see what I mean. Our average day might look a bit like this at work, going into meeting after meeting and never having time to get deep into a problem to find those creative solutions. Days like this get us deflated and we lose our passion for trying to solve problems. What does that mean for us? Well, we need to make some changes. And one place we can start is with our working rhythm. Defend your team's time to make, to explore, test, learn, think about stuff by setting up a repeatable rhythm that streamlines the managing and communicating and clears space for the team to do that essential work. And finally, bold move number 5, create good trouble. Organizations need systems and processes to align people. They're not the enemy. Without these things, there's chaos. But there's 2 common pitfalls we often see that we need to watch out for. Number 1, the more rigid the structures we create are, the worse they're going to respond to the kind of constant disruption that we're facing today. Number 2, These same structures set up to help us can end up constraining us. Our useful divergent thinking gets shut down or channeled. And in innovation, we need our people looking at challenges in different ways. If you want your people to think differently in your organization, you must create a culture where people feel safe to openly question things, where people actively are encouraged to notice the way things are, look for ways they could be better, and give them permission to challenge things. Creating good trouble means having a mindset to change the current systems, processes, and refusing to accept, oh, that's just the way things get done. This isn't about being needlessly disruptive. It's about challenging with good intent to make things better. Owning and driving your alternative plan forward if you're going to see the future that you want to see come good. A great example of this is this brilliant young woman that we know that she's driven the conversation around the environmental crisis. She was frustrated with adults' inaction, and the actions that this one young person took, standing alone, is now a movement of hundreds of thousands of school children around the world. What she represents for us is the spirit of being unconstrained by how things are and thinking about how things could be. Another thing I want you to think about is when you've joined a new group or a new organization, think about how that feels. Everything's new. You have this golden window of about 6 months where you're looking around and seeing everything with fresh eyes. You've got not just the awareness, but you've got the energy and desire to change things, even if you might not immediately think you've got the agency to do it. But over time, our resistance to the system begins to wane. With every knockback or polite, oh, thanks for the suggestion, but we can't do it because we lose faith in the idea that it's worth changing things at all and decide it's easier just not to act. I'm here to encourage us to hold our nerve. We need to encourage ourselves and empower our people to take action and ownership. Encourage ourselves and hold the space for others to do the same. So that's 5 places to start. 5 bold moves if you want to create a culture of innovation in your organization. That, number 1, move like starlings. Stop thinking in big programs and instead set up small teams focused around a really clear objective and do all you can to remove the barriers for them making progress. Number 2, build playgrounds. Set really clear boundaries for your people to play, experiment, fail, and learn fast. Number 3, get experimenting. Put your early ideas out into the world for feedback and testing in the quickest, most cost-effective way you can. Number 4, protect your team's time to make. Rebalance what you spend your time doing. And number 5, create some good trouble. Start noticing things again. And then with good intent, drive a plan forward that's going to improve stuff. So those are the 5 bold moves, right? And the thing I hear often is like, okay, great. Yeah, how do I get started? I want you to think about this image. We've all seen kids learning how to ride a bike. The thing that they don't have is a 400-page risk assessment that they've spent the last 6 months building. They just get on their bike and maybe they fall off. They might wobble around, but before you know it, they're on their way. And that's my encouragement for all of you today. The trick to getting started is just get started. So thank you so much for listening. That's a whirlwind tour through our 5 bold moves. Thanks for listening, and I hope to hear from you soon. Good luck in in everything that you're trying to achieve.
That was awesome. So up on your screen right now, everyone, there should be a poll. And I'm really interested to know which of those 5 bold moves resonated with you the most from where you're sitting today. Hopefully we can do this live. Whilst that's ticking away in the background, I encourage you to just take a moment, take a breath, and think about what of those things, those practical things that you will have control over, could you start doing from today? I'd be interested. I think the chat is working now. So if you wanted to post it live for a bit of public accountability, feel free. Amazing. So, oh, interesting. So rebalance, managing and making, yeah, I feel like we all know the pain of sitting in back-to-back Zoom calls. Sorry for giving you another one today. Yeah, I think that taking a good look at ourselves and really thinking about where can we have the best energy to move forward is a good thing to do. Where is that space of creativity? I think the other one in there that's really resonating with people is good trouble. I mean, who doesn't love lovely Greta? Yeah, good trouble is, there's a very good book you could read called Be More Pirate. If you're interested in the theory of create good trouble, it is a wonderful read. So I encourage you to read that, get inspired about breaking the rules for good intent. And some great comments about Chris's hair. So thank you, Chris, for that. We will see you soon. Stay online. You can answer questions, ask Chris questions, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. See you in a bit.
So I'd love to I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts about that. What are you going to commit to in the next day or so? Is anyone going to be brave enough to tell us? So when we think about those 5 bold moves, thanks, Sam. Yeah, spend our time making, not just managing. I think that's a good thing. So when we think about these moves, it's really easy to kind of stay philosophical about them, and actually it needs a lot of thinking about. So you can treat them at the very surface level, or you can go really deep. And we have the privilege to invite onto the virtual stage Claire Rowney now, who I'm going to talk to for the next half an hour, and I'm sure it's all why you're all here, about her journey with the 5 bold moves and Macmillan. So as a bit of an introduction, we have been working with Macmillan for about the last year. You'll all know Macmillan, obviously. It's a household name and one of the UK's most high-profile, beloved charities. They have been on a very fascinating journey, and we've had the privilege of watching and hopefully helping. And Claire Rowney, the Executive Director of Fundraising, Marketing and Innovation, big job, at Macmillan, is here today. And it's fair to say that she is one of the most respected leaders in the charity world, and we are extremely privileged to work with her. In fact, secret, she's probably one of my favorite clients that I've worked with ever. So I'm really happy that we get to talk to her for half an hour today. As we go, if you want to keep asking questions, we will have time for them at the end. But to get us going, Claire, how are you?
Good, thanks, Emily, and thank you for giving me a little green nameplate, which is very nice. I've never had that.
Well, we love to treat our guests well. I'm sorry, I can't give you a wine virtually.
No, that's okay. I've got my water around my tea. I'm good. I'm well hydrated.
Good. So to get us going, I guess that everyone on the call will just be super fascinated about you and your journey. So as far as I know, you joined Macmillan in 2019, is that right? I'd love to know a little bit more about why you joined, what you thought the opportunities were, and obviously 2019 is an interesting moment in time. So what did you think was going to happen? And then we can talk about what actually happened in a minute.
So yeah, I did. I joined Macmillan in 2019. Before that, I was at Save the Children for a couple of years doing similar work, and before that spent a very long stint at Cancer Research UK for 13 years, where I did quite a lot of innovation and campaign innovation. I arrived because it seems a strange thing to say, but those people that are in the sector who are on the webinar today will understand this. I had sort of fallen in love with the cancer cause, and whilst Save the Children was brilliant and very fulfilling and massively educational for me, I really wanted to get back to healthcare and specifically to supporting people with cancer. So that's really why I went. And I should also say I got into fundraising 20 years ago to do events, and then slowly but surely got bitten by the bug of doing good while I did events. But I'm one of those ones that sort of arrived with a bit more of a commercial mindset, and then have stayed, and it's been fantastic. So my expectations at Macmillan were, we had a fairly static, very mature portfolio of fundraising products, and we're an organisation that relies like 98% on the UK public, so we're very reliant on being able to galvanise the UK to do things for us. So really, I thought my job was going to be refreshing and sort of revitalising our portfolio of fundraising activity. And I was able to begin that process for about, you know, a year, I suppose, before the pandemic hit. And then, of course, everything changed. So, and yeah, and that's when things got interesting.
Yeah. And in that, so you were there for a little under a year before things massively changed. What were your observations about the kind of transformation agenda? What had you seen or got in your head? What made the Macmillan, not just obviously the cause, the end cause, but what made the job that you were going to do really exciting?
What's really interesting, so I'm somebody who likes to make change. So I like to be able to disrupt, and I like to be able to try new things. And one of the really interesting things about Macmillan is it's like an amazing heritage brand and heritage organisation. It's over 100 years old. Throughout its history, it's done some really cutting edge things, but it had got to a place which was almost that. It was, you know, the UK's most loved brand, you know, in the top 6 of all brands in terms of respect in the UK. And actually that can be quite paralysing for a brand and for an organisation, because I think people inside think, well, we're doing really well, so we don't want to break anything, and it creates this kind of what I refer to as a farming mentality. So this is what we do, these are the crops we sow, we water them in the same way, we do pretty much the same thing every year, and then we know exactly what our results are going to be. And that's across fundraising and the way we looked after people living with cancer. And there were small innovations going on and there was progress being made, but we weren't talking about big steps forward. So for me, the exciting opportunity at Macmillan was to be a bit more of a disruptor and really think about how we could make some big steps. Because one of the things I say at work all the time is, yeah, we're the second biggest charity in terms of the income that we generate, and we only help 25% of people from the point of their diagnosis, which means there are 75% more people that we need to reach, which means we need 3 times as much money, or 3 times more money. So, you know, there's a kind of real drive to do more, but we weren't going to get there by just the farmer mentality. We'd need to be doing things quite differently.
So then what happened? Obviously, turn of 2020. You're looking January, February, March in the face. Pandemic happens, unprecedented times. What was the immediate impact on Macmillan?
I mean, like every organisation, we're an organisation of over 2,000 people. The first thing everyone worried about was, are we going to be able to carry on the work that we do? How are we going to get people away from home, doing all of those sorts of things? I think as a senior leader in the organisation, I felt very passionately that we should quite quickly move away from talking about the post and the laptops and moving to what's the impact for people living with cancer. What's happening with diagnosis, what's happening with treatment, how are people being cared for and supported? You know, the face of healthcare changed hugely during that period. And I very sort of quickly got to what do we need, do we want Macmillan to be known for through the pandemic? How are we going to be looking after people living with cancer? What are their new needs that have emerged very quickly and very unexpectedly? And how are we going to measure them? How are we going to understand them? And how are we going to deliver services, products, and so on that meet their needs? And of course, how are we going to keep the ball rolling in terms of bringing income in? How are we going to give people the opportunity to fundraise in new ways? But in
sorry,
go on. But I was just going to say, in some ways, that context creates a real drive for innovation, almost innovating and being creative and doing things differently during a period like that is more straightforward because everyone gets that they need to do it. So it does create like a really helpful environment for changing the narrative and changing the way people work, because people very quickly, we were doing an office move at the time of the pandemic, and I remember there was uproar about whether or not people were going to have lockers and or pedestals, and it was one of those things that, in, you know, organisations just ran, and it was like, oh my god, I don't want to have another conversation about a pedestal. And then all of a sudden it was like, forget your pedestals, guys, you haven't got an office for the next, you know, year. And it does sort of change your mindset, doesn't it, when something like that happens? Hanging on to that spirit of we urgently need to do things differently was almost a bigger challenge.
Yeah, I was listening to a really great podcast this morning actually about the along the lines of never waste a good crisis and the power of a crisis to create resilience, and that resilience isn't an individual game, it's a team game. And there's a lot on what you're talking about, you know, actually using the power of a crisis to innovate the things you probably should have done anyway. So you're in this point where lots of flux has happened, but the pandemic obviously for you guys had a pretty crisis moment at the beginning. You're at the very, very bleeding edge of what's going on in the world. How did that evolve over time? And at what point did you think, actually, we need to sustain this transformation or think about differently about the organization?
Well, I think it came from really from the emerging needs of people with cancer. And the fact that they had changed so significantly, and our service offer just, you know, our kind of old service offer wasn't fit for purpose. So I think that was a lot of the drive. And what we chose to do, what was interesting about it was, and this is probably one of the reasons that we ended up working with you guys, was we centralized innovation. So innovation for service delivery and fundraising and everything sort of now sits together in this kind of center of excellence. But what that meant was almost it devolved responsibility to that team, and everyone else sort of switched off that drive for innovation. And so you may or may not remember that when we first brought you, I'm sure you do, when I first asked you to come in, it was to talk about creativity. It wasn't innovation. We didn't really talk about innovation. We talked about the need for us all to have more creative mindsets and to kind of come at problems not with what's the data, what's the insight, or those things are important, but what's possible, and that kind of mindset of exploration and discovery, rather than we're an organisation that knows our staff and so this is what we do, this is the problem, this is what we do.
And what did you discover about that problem? It was a very fascinating meeting. We were locked in a room with the exec, and there was a lot of debate about how to unlock people, how to really free people to be creative. Can you remind me and some of the audience of what those conversations were and where the kind of sticking points for particularly the leaders were? Because I think that's actually really useful for people to hear.
Yeah, and it probably goes back to some of that paralysis, and it's that kind of vulnerability that people feel in failure. And when you work in a successful organisation, and success at Macmillan is, you know, not like, you know, obviously we're not a kind of we don't reward people financially for great success, but these are the, you know, they get championed and they get a lot of attention when things succeed. And so in the end, what that drives, when success is the only thing that's celebrated, is people only want to succeed, and they'll only do things if they really know they will succeed, which is one of those very interesting things that I think Chris was saying. You've only got 6 to 8 months in an organisation to really understand what needs to change. And one of the first things I realised was, my God, people don't move without all of the data and all of the insight, which, by the way, might be flawed and might lead to failure anyway. So why don't we just try and kind of move into that experimentation phase? So I think that was a really big part of our conversation, that kind of failure, that kind of desire to fail. We definitely didn't have that, and that was one of the things that we needed to address. And the other was, you know, kind of around rebalancing, managing, and making. And in our history at Macmillan, it's described. I mean, these were the days I would probably thoroughly enjoyed working at Macmillan as the Wild West. People could say, "Oh, but it was the Wild West, Claire," and I think, "Oh God, that sounds fantastic." So everyone's very proud that there's loads of systems and process and governance and compliance, and that is the thing that's really valued at Macmillan. And you know, it's a pendulum, isn't it? And these things swing, and the Wild West days are definitely not with us anymore. And we had swung to this sense of following the rules is the right thing to do. And we needed to sort of break free of those shackles a bit and liberate people to do experiments. And I think when you came and talked to us, and you created, I think, this framework of safety. So like I think our exec team were able to feel quite safe in the idea of being creative. And again, we weren't really calling it innovation. We were just being creative and like just, you know, testing some boundaries and things, because there was a sense of, oh, I get it. There is a framework and there's a safety net around this. And it's almost like it's a process and a system, and we understand those, and so we will follow it.
That's really interesting. So the work that we're doing now, could you describe how that it's interesting you talk about it in terms of confidence, creative confidence. Actually, I really love that. And the kind of loosening of the reins, which I definitely sense from you guys, that there has been a confidence that's created that's enabled people to let go a bit. Can you describe how that was to live through it, and what's been some of the results of that?
Yeah. So you remember we did the exec team, that's about 7 of us, and then we did our leaders, so there's about 100 people who are sort of head level or director level at Macmillan, and that's across all of our teams, and we launched the 5 bold moves to them. And that was a really good moment, I think, because I think, well, we got really good feedback on it, right? So when we had an all day together, and when you guys had done your presentation and we asked for feedback on the day, and there was quite a lot of content from you and from others, but this came out as something that had really inspired the team, which was really promising. But actually the evidence more was one of the teams immediately built a squad, and it was a really interesting squad that was built, because so it was like this idea of starlings, and so they built a team of 7 people to so some of you I'm sure will know about Aggresso. It's a payment software. This is as much as I know. It's a payment software thing, and luckily I don't have to interact with it, but evidently it's wildly painful at Macmillan. I'm sure in other organisations it's more streamlined and the sign-offs are easier, etc., etc. So one of our finance people set up this squad to solve this problem, and that's one of the interesting things about thinking about these 5 bold moves, because actually a lot of the most powerful way we've used them is not to create sort of new ideas or new products, although we will and we have, but it's more about what are those annoying things that hold us back. And so that got us to thinking about how we can use it to really address some of our bigger organisational, what I call sticky issues. So those things that come up time after time in engagement surveys that you hear anecdotally, that if you say to people, what's it like to work at Macmillan, they'll say, this thing really gets in my way, or that thing. So I spent some time pulling together these sticky issues, and we got a sense of what they were, and then have launched 3 so we've launched this program called Macmillan Works, and it's all about making Macmillan work better and more effectively, and basically liberating people to be able to spend their time doing more making. And the best work I call it the best work of their careers. So how can we enable you to do the very best work of your careers? Because if you're going to do it anyway, you should do it with us. You should do it at Macmillan, and our job really is to enable you to do that. And we're using the 5 bold moves to like blast through some of these. Well, we're going to try and blast through some of these sticky issues, but attack them in a different way, because these are issues that we have tried and failed to address, or not really nailed the solution to. So that's where we're at the moment, midway through that process, which has been real. But then, of course, it's kind of got this slightly viral effect across the organisation, where people are learning more about the moves, they're learning more about some of the principles that we've got around them, they're learning more about the methodology of how you can apply the moves, and are just sort of taking it and running with it in their own, solving their own problems. So maybe not the big organisational ones, but using them to experiment and be more thoughtful about it, and giving themselves time and space to do it.
That's amazing. So obviously it's really early days. You know, these shifts don't happen overnight. But what's your sense of, or what's your hope for the end impact? What kind of organisation is Macmillan going to be if it truly embraces some of the principles that we're talking about here?
So I think the starling analogy is a really good one, because I think the organisation will become an organisation where people feel empowered and able to solve the problems that they're trying to solve in their own way, and connect into an organisation that are all kind of pulling in the same direction. So I think that's going to be a really important part of it. You know, in some organisations I have worked in, I meet a lot of people who can point to the problems of an organisation, but not many people who are prepared to lean in and actually do something about it. And I think what we're building with this programme, and with really valuing the work that's coming out of the work that teams are doing, is a group of people who are prepared to lean in because they know that it's valued, but because they know that they're going to get results, and because they know that whatever is happening, they're learning through it. So I think one of the things that I've said to you before is, I think this will have great results in terms of we will nail some problems, and there'll be some problems that we don't nail with this inevitably, but also we're really it's a great learning and development intervention for the people that are doing it. Like, they're learning so much through doing it. And I've done innovation for years and years, but recently went to one of our, we're running Firestarter, as you'll know, sessions, and I went to one of our Firestarter sessions, and it was so fun, and I felt very sort of liberated doing it. And we were picking apart, basically what we were doing was destroying, we weren't destroying, but we kind of were destroying one of our flagship products, so World's Biggest Coffee Morning, which is, you know, like the most protected of our products within our portfolio. And it was just really good fun, and I think it's bringing joy back into people's work as well, which I think is one of the things that makes people come back to it, because they're like, oh, I really enjoyed doing that and it's working, so let's do it again. So I think it'll just be a stronger, more resilient, more disciplined organisation that's more deliberate about creativity and innovation, and is more thoughtful about the way in which it gets into solving problems.
That's amazing. So there's two sticky questions I have, and I'm aware that people are asking questions in the Q&A, so I'll get to those in a second as well. But I guess one of the things that I observe in clients is when you go into this work with hope and energy, and then you'll hit some rail blocks, mostly because you're getting a new organisation meeting the old organisation. Are you seeing any of that conflict happening? Who is stepping in to help? And do you think those kind of roadblocks are surmountable?
Yes. So yes to a lot of that. Am I seeing them? Yes. Do I think they're surmountable? Yes, probably. So the new organisation and the old organisation meeting is really, really true. It's like really, really true. And one of the things that's been really interesting about it is, like, philosophically, people really like the 5 moves. Like, nobody, 5 bold moves, nobody in that leadership away day that we had said, I think this is rubbish, I don't think it's going to work. They're all quite inspired by them. They all think they're quite exciting. But it's when the rubber hits the road, isn't it, that people are like, oh, actually, it's a bit uncomfortable, and actually maybe I don't think it will work. And we have definitely had some of that. And a lot of that has been to do with pace of decision making, where decisions are made. Just suddenly people going, oh, does that mean I won't make that decision anymore because it's happening inside this squad? And we're like, yeah, but that's what you signed up. That's what you signed up to. And so I'm finding that even at exec level, people will say, but I don't really think. And I'll say, no, do you remember when we set this up, I said that whatever happened in the squads, if it was significant in terms of change or significant in terms of budget, we would come for EST sign off. But if not, we were empowering the teams. And of course, one of the principles that we put at the heart of all of this was empowerment over controlling everything. And so I suppose retrospectively, I'm very pleased that we put some rules in around how we were going to use the 5 bold moves, because it gives me something to go back to everyone with and remind them that, as uncomfortable as it is, this is how we agreed to do it and what we agreed to do. I think it really helps, and I think any organisation doing this, if it's a hierarchical organisation, and Macmillan is, to have somebody in a very senior position who's going to champion it. But we've also got some really good, powerful catalysts on the exec team who I have sort of hooked into some of the squad work and making them feel kind of responsible for its success, so it doesn't all sort of hang off me at a senior level. It's a fairly well distributed, although, you know, I'm clinging onto it all, it's a fairly well distributed sort of senior team on it.
And I think you've beautifully articulated the rub, because we all took a good game about distributing decision making, but when it's actually taking something away from us, that fear and the risk appetite definitely comes to the surface. So my second question was actually going to be, and it's like you read my mind, Claire. So what does this mean for leadership? So the way that we talk about the 5 bold moves is deliberately about empowering leaders to go, you can just go do this, just go do it. But there's a deeper and more challenging answer to what's the future of leadership in this model. And you're articulating some of the challenges of that. So in Macmillan, is your next step, okay, what does this really mean for leadership? And what are your thoughts about that, standing on this side of the change?
So it's really interesting, because alongside this sort of creative work that we're doing, we are very much having a live conversation about what are the sort of leaders that we want to build at Macmillan. And we've done a sort of, I think, very interesting exploration of the sort of theory behind leadership and the thinking behind leadership and what kind of leaders we want to build. Ultimately, servant leadership feels like the direction of travel that's right for us. One of the things that I always say to my team is, my basic job is here to enable you to do your jobs. Like, there's not like a thing that I'm sort of required. I mean, beyond signing off holidays and big invoices, like, fundamentally my value is making sure you can do the stuff that's really valuable. And we have people who are managers and who have technical expertise and are here to do the making, and then we have people who are here to enable the making. And I think if you have an amazing leadership team, they can jump, like, the making's fun. Like, one of the worst things about leadership is you don't get to do so much making. This is what I always say to the team: you've got a much better job than me, because you get to do really interesting things and I get to talk about the interesting things, and then I have to let you do them. So actually this is also quite nice, because I'm quite involved in Macmillan Works, and that's fun. But I think ultimately, the leaders that we will build and will be really successful for the organisation will be the ones that are able to let go and enable people to do their brilliant work in their own way. So one of the things that I've loved about this work and the first bold move around Move Like Starlings is, we've worked really, really hard to get diversity of thought into our squads. And it's been really, really interesting not to hear from the usual echo chamber opinions and thoughts and experiences. And it's also one of the things that I've enjoyed working with the coaches and us, because they're all so different, like stylistically, in terms of the language they use, in terms of the pace that they use. And I've really enjoyed that, because I think that all just brings a different dynamic to the way you get to the end result.
That's really fascinating. Thank you. So I'm going to come to the, we've had some, Mark Brown Parker is loving the Q&A. And there are some good questions in here. So sorry, I've lost it. So actually Steve, who I think has left now, but he asked an interesting question about how do Macmillan innovate and adapt to the pandemic with regards to
patient home visits. Yeah. No, arguably we should have had we should have had a plan in place, but no, we didn't. So we launched a buzz. So so Macmillan nurse wise, basically what happened with Macmillan nurses is most of them were co-opted onto the front line to work on the pandemic. So essentially there was a big period of time that we did have Macmillan nurses, but we didn't have a lot of them. So it was a very, very strange time to have a cancer diagnosis, and people weren't getting their treatments, and if they were getting their treatments, they were foreshortened. People weren't getting diagnosis of cancers. So the actual pull on Macmillan nurses was very different, because the volumes went down really significantly, but their needs were very deep, because it was a very difficult period for people living with cancer. They were lonely, they were frightened, and that's why they needed a Macmillan nurse. So they all went virtual, but we also launched Macmillan buddying service. So we have quite a lot of volunteers that pre-pandemic would be paired with people with cancer, and they would help them do all sorts of things. So they might drive them to hospitals, or they might do their shopping for them. Like, it very much depended on people's personal needs. They couldn't do that. So we set up this telephone buddying service. This was one of our kind of pandemic innovations, which it continues now because it's been so powerful. So people are paired up. And basically, normally the volunteer would be someone who'd had cancer in the past themselves and had had some sort of similar experience, and could essentially empathise. When people have a cancer diagnosis, it will feel like a burden talking to family and close friends, because they're sort of going through it as well in a different way, albeit, but it's a person with cancer can often feel that they're a burden. So having somebody outside of their family that they feel really able to talk to has been really, really powerful. So that's one of the innovations that's continued, but it's sort of linked to that Macmillan nurse thing, because we just didn't have the workforce that we normally would.
And do you feel like, obviously the pandemic forced some innovation, do you feel like you would have got to that innovation anyway, or do you think that it allowed you to do things that you wouldn't have done or think in different ways?
It definitely enabled us to do things that we wouldn't have done. So from a fundraising perspective, a lot of the innovation we probably just would never have done. So kind of digitizing things and so on. But it was really about the context. It was about where people were and how people were interacting with time together. So we did a lot of kind of online family gaming, and like we had games night ins and that kind of thing. And they went, you know, they were very sort of successful, but actually they were great innovations, completely dead in the water now because people don't want to do anything online, you know, fair play. Yeah. So there were some things, I think, there were different activities that became, you know, more successful or less successful. And I think one of the things it taught us was we shouldn't expect, so coffee morning is a great example. It was a product that brought in like 28, 29 million pounds a year for us. People were absolutely in the habit of getting together and doing a coffee morning. People would do them in their offices and they do them in their workplaces and in schools. As soon as that habit is broken, actually getting people to resume that habit is quite difficult. And so that product has really suffered as a result. And so we've had to really think, not innovatively necessarily about coffee morning. We've tried some pivots, but realizing that actually what it has fundamentally disrupted is people's kind of annual habits, and they're not necessarily in the mindset of this is what I do every September and this is what I do every December. People seem at the moment, and it'll be interesting to see if it settles down, more attuned to making choices, first of all, with much shorter deadlines, so people are registering later to do things. There's more spontaneity, and in a lot of ways that's lovely, but it's sort of not what we're trained to for. Yeah,
that's interesting. So it's challenging quite a lot of fundamental beliefs that all of your innovation sits on. That's really fascinating. So I'm just looking at the time. I'm sure people have to go, and I want to answer some of the questions that have popped up on the chat. So I'm just looking through. So Helly has a question about, has this led to practical promotions of women or other minorities versus before? That's a really interesting question. We've had, I know diversity is hot on everyone's lips right now, and it's ever more present for us to crack. So what's your thought about how the FODBOG moves intersect with your diversity challenges and ambitions?
Well, I think the Move Like Starlings, at the very beginning of it, the Move Like Starlings things requires diversity. If you basically take, and that's, I mean, a lot actually at Macmillan, a lot of the time we have to search out the men to be involved in things rather than the women, because we're a very female-centric organisation. But we actually are very, very mindful when we're building our little sevens about diversity in all of it. So we look at levels, we look at ethnic diversity, we look at disability, we look at gender, and, you know, age and so on, to make sure that we're getting as diverse a squad as we can. That's kind of a really important starting point for us, and we do really challenge ourselves. And sometimes there's somebody who likes to get things done, I'll be like, I think it's good enough, and then someone will say it's not good enough, and then we have to wait a little bit longer. But then what we do is get a really, really good squad. So I think that's a really important starting point. I think there are loads of things that we do that are trying to address the fact that not all voices are heard equally at Macmillan, and most importantly, or as importantly, we aren't necessarily serving all of the communities in the right way from a people living with cancer perspective. And we've applied a lot of this thinking to how we reach more diverse audiences externally, as well as how we're involving a really diverse group internally.
Yeah, I think diversity being a fundamental principle of how you do a good innovation is a good way to think about it. Okay, so we've got an anonymous attendee saying, where are you seeing the most impact in what the teams are doing? Is it visible, or has it taken on a life of its own?
It is visible, and it has taken on a life of its own, and that's lovely when I hear about things that have just sort of popped up and are happening. And I've shared this example with you before, Emily, but one of the Facebook challenge. So those of you who are in fundraising will know about Facebook challenge. It's like a platform on Facebook that you can set challenges and people sign up to do the challenge and do fundraising. And it's had a real rise over the last couple of years. And we did a couple and they were fairly successful. And what we have done, I've done is say, let's do like a big experiment here and let's see how many products we can get out there, what will really work. Let's treat Facebook challenge like a playground and let's experiment in it and really like go for it. Not like do 6 this year and see what happens and then maybe do 10 next year, but like I've set the target of like 24, so 2 a month. And some of them will like fail gloriously, but let's see the ones that don't and let's be agile and let's back them as soon as we see something working. And we've had some, you know, like we've had some really good success and we'll drive millions of pounds out of that platform this year by doing that. And the things that we sort of didn't necessarily expect to work have been the things that have, you know, that have been slightly off the wall. Like we've had a dog walking one. And I was like, I'm not sure. I mean, I know people like dogs because as I always say, we've got this Yammer channel. We've got loads of Yammer channels at Macmillan, which have, you know, are not wildly followed. And then we have Mac Pets, and everyone knows about Mac Pets. And it's basically where we post photos of our pets, and it's like constant spam, and we love it. And like we love seeing everyone's pets, and so it kind of should, you know. Anyway, those are the sorts of things that.
Really fascinating, isn't it? Because that is about, if we go back to the 5 bold moves, that is about good trouble and believing in your own convictions, using your intuition. You know, everyone knows that everyone bought a dog in the pandemic, so why wouldn't that be a thing? But it's interesting that your professional instincts say, yeah, that's not it. So I'm just going to pick on a phrase that you use because I think it's brilliant and I'm definitely going to steal it, so thank you. I love this thought about fail gloriously. It's a beautiful expression of learn as you go, and that's definitely what I've been doing today. So thank you so much for everyone, especially Claire and Chris, for coming and sharing the wisdom. If anyone here has other questions or wants any of this original content, feel free to reach out. We will come back to you with a recap of what was said and some of the insight that Claire has for you about how to start this journey or continue this journey if you're already on it. So thank you, Claire. Thank you everyone for coming, and we will see you again next time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.